For all of my life, Jurassic Park has been, and remains, my all-time favorite movie. There have been challengers, contenders, and pretenders who all come and go, but to this day, Jurassic Park stands as the undisputed champion in my mind and in my heart. That being said, despite Jurassic Park being the closest that we as a society will ever get to cinematic perfection, the film unfortunately is not perfect. It does have its flaws, most subtle and very nitpicky and easily forgivable. However, to me, there are 3 scenes in the movie that I absolutely can't stand and prefer to skip through upon rewatching the film. The first being the scene with the annoying kid in snake water where Grant breaks down how raptors hunt. This scene establishes Grant's dislike of children as well as elaborates more on what we'll see from the raptors earlier in the movie. But honestly, the scene goes on way too long and I find it really unnecessary. But I'm not here to talk about the kid. No, I'm talking about the other 2 scenes in the film I can't stand. Remember when I put out my first video on Jurassic World Dominion, and I said that Laura Dern's character has always been hit or miss with me? That's because as far as I'm concerned, she delivers 2 of the cringiest lines of dialogue that leave a mark on an otherwise gold standard film. I'm of course referring to the 2 lines of dialogue that Dern has that make a pro-feminist message in the movie. Now, I know you're probably rolling your eyes and thinking I'm a bigot that has a problem with women, when really, I'm not. What I have a problem is that both lines are very poorly written and seem to be promoting women at the expense of men. They make the situation needlessly awkward and paint Ellie Sattler, an otherwise likable woman in this movie, in a somewhat negative light. I'm not gonna lie, folks, I honestly didn't expect to be making this video so soon. But unfortunately, recent events have forced my hand, and I now feel it needs to be said. This talking point has been a long time in the making, so now I feel it is time to get it out in the open. Hello everybody, I am the Linkzilla, and today I'm going to be walking you through a particular problem that Jurassic Park series has had. Now I promise you guys, this isn't going to be just a reactionary outrage video at a stance that the Jurassic World production team has taken, but rather that there's an incredible amount to talk about with this topic. I know that it's easy to talk about nowadays with that so many franchises are being permeated, corrupted, and sometimes even destroyed because of Hollywood's left-leaning woke agenda that has taken a stranglehold in pop culture in recent years. But I'm here to tell you that this is a problem that has literally plagued Jurassic Park from the very beginning, and in order to explain this, I'll need to take you all the way back to when Michael Crichton first wrote Jurassic Park as a novel. It's November of 1990 and Jurassic Park has just hit the shelves and quickly climbing to the top of New York Times bestseller list. However, despite how overall solid the book may be, it was not without criticism from certain interest groups. And unfortunately, this is one situation where they may have actually had a case. Nothing to lose one's head over, but you know how these people operate by now. No minor infraction goes unpersecuted. It all has to do with the depiction of Ellie Sattler in the Jurassic Park novel. It's a hard pill for especially me to swallow, but even something as minor as Ellie's depiction here wouldn't fly in pop culture today, regardless of how harmless it is. Ellie is a genuine character in the novel, an intelligent and strong-willed woman of unparalleled courage and strong moral character. Despite all of that, Crichton keeps making several references throughout the novel to the fact that all of the male characters that interact with her often get distracted by her beauty and her figure. And keep in mind, despite some exceptions in early chapters, Ellie is the only female character we have throughout most of the book. Throughout the book, we get lines of dialogue like this. I quote, "Grant was amused to see Morris gaping at her. Ellie was wearing cut-off jeans and a work shirt tied at her midriff. She was 24, darkly tanned, her blonde hair was pulled back. "Ellie keeps us going," Grant said, introducing her. "She's very good at what she does." And other quotes, like Ian Malcolm's introduction. "You're extremely pretty, Dr. Sattler," he said. "I could look at your legs all day." And then from Lex and Tim's introduction. Tim was trying to organize his impressions and was looking at the blonde woman's legs when he realized he suddenly knew who the bearded man was. "Your mouth is open," Lex said. And when Ellie stays behind with the Stegosaurus and Gennaro stays with her, they started walking. Malcolm said, "Why exactly is our lawyer staying?" Grant shrugged. "It might have something to do with Dr. Sattler." "Really? The shorts, you think?" "It's happened before," Grant said. All of these can make the case that Crichton was largely using Ellie for fan service, as most of the lines of dialogue have a rather objectifying nature. Even beyond that, Gennaro is surprised to find that she's a woman upon meeting her face to face, having assumed that Dr. Sattler was actually a man. And while I can easily see how these lines of dialogue can make modern audiences feel uncomfortable, I honestly think that there is a bit more nuance to this topic than is being taken. The truth is, each line of dialogue relating to Ellie like this is made by or described by a male character in the story. Therefore, it's the story establishing the character of each of the male leads, and that they are easily distracted by Ellie's looks. Even someone as young as Tim found himself fascinated by her. So if anything, rather than Crichton portraying Ellie as a sexist stereotype, it's actually Crichton portraying sexist stereotypes of men. But unfortunately, the one thing you can count on from political ideologues is that they don't ever consider the nuance to any situation. It makes them too uncomfortable. So Crichton was accused of being a sexist because of how Ellie was portrayed. Fortunately, the world was a much more reasonable place back then, and a non-issue like this was handled with dignity rather than cancellation. So Universal, most likely Kathleen Kennedy, suggested adjusting Sattler's character for the film in order to correct Crichton's perceived chauvinism. Now granted, this was considered a thing back in the 90s, with female characters being pushed into prominence more heavily. Thankfully, it was handled with tact and restraint back then, whereas nowadays, it is tiring. What I believe should be taken more seriously than how other characters are taken with Ellie's beauty is what Ellie does and what she contributes to the plot. And while Ellie, in her introductory chapters, is largely there to share ideas with Grant, she is the one who initially investigates the Stegosaurus' illness. In the novel, the characters recognize that Grant will never be able to make it to the maintenance shed alive with the raptors roaming the compound. So the solution is, Ellie risks her life to go to the front gate of the hotel, distract the raptors, to give Grant a chance to get there. But of course, to these people, words speak louder than actions, and Ellie, to her detriment, has two of the single worst lines in the entire movie. The scenes where her character becomes nothing more than a mouthpiece for feminism in the movie. The first scene is when the tour arrives at the Tyrannosaur paddock.
God creates dinosaurs. God destroys dinosaurs. God creates man. Man destroys God. Man creates dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs eat man. Woman inherits the earth.
First off, there's a lot to unpack with how wrong this scene is. First and foremost is the fact that it begins with Malcolm postulating the timeline of events, beginning with God creating dinosaurs, leading to man destroying God, and then man creating dinosaurs. Anyone who has read the Jurassic Park novels, even the second one, knows that Malcolm would never attribute God with the creation of anything. Even if Malcolm is willing to allow the possibility of God's existence, he would literally say, God is not part of the equation. All of this comes off as part of the film crew's fundamental misunderstanding of Malcolm's character from the novel, but that's a topic for another video. Secondly, what makes this piece of dialogue so frustrating and so trite is that not only how unnecessary and out of place it is, but really a fundamental misunderstanding of grammar, logic, and reality. I used to roll my eyes at this as a kid because I felt it was so stupid that a woman as intelligent as Ellie decided to philosophically separate women away from the greater whole of mankind, whereas the simple fact is, every woman on this planet is literally a collective that is a part of mankind. It has nothing to do with it being labeled man in mankind, because it is the name of our species. Therefore, if dinosaurs overrun humanity to extinction, women are on the menu as well. But what is even worse is that feminism-driven ideologues have become so petty and pathetic in recent years that they actually do want to change the language to create a distinction to separate mankind and womankind. And they want to do this with all words that have a male-related homonym in them, changing words like history to herstory, or even the word management, just because it has man in it. Some people make the argument that it should be changed to a gender-neutral word, but that's the point. It already is a gender-neutral word. Mankind encompasses men and women of all shapes, sizes, and ages and ethnicities, and yet these people are attributing gender to it purely to push their own corrupt agenda, all for the promotion of their pathetic and fragile egos. Honestly, the reaction to this scene says all you need to know. The two men in the car turn to look at her, Malcolm clearly showing a look of dissatisfied confusion, whereas Grant smiles coyly, because he knows Ellie's personality. As far as I'm concerned, that smile is entirely condescending, because Grant knows it's better to let her keep her matriarchal delusions rather than futilely try to correct her. But worse is the fact that this shows an unflattering aspect of Ellie's character. The argument against sexism, at least as it should be, is that it is inherently unfair to value one gender as lesser than the other, which is what so many feminists claim that men do by valuing women as being less equal to men. So then, how is this scene fair? What is it saying about Ellie and her relationship with Grant that shows that she secretly values all the men in her life as inferior purely because of their gender? She, by her own logic, turned it into an us versus them scenario where Malcolm was putting us all in the same sinking boat. But no, to her logic, dinosaurs coming back to life is entirely men's fault, therefore only men will face the consequences. On the argument of valuing one gender over the other, let's talk about the other scene. It is in the third act of the film where Ellie and Muldoon are gearing up to go to the maintenance shed. John Hammond states that it should be him that goes instead of her.
It ought to be me really going. Well, I'm and you're
Look, we can discuss sexism and survival situations when I get back.
Already bad is how poorly John is depicted handling this situation. But even worse than that is how Ellie reacts to this. This is easily the most obnoxious aspect of people who believe this, and why trying to debate with them is so pointless. They have already closed off their minds and immediately want to equate any situation to sexism. But I'm here to advocate for Hammond and make the claim that what Ellie assumed was sexism was actually chivalry. But the problem is, ideologues don't know the difference. To them, it is a distinction without difference. The truth is, what the modern-day misconception of male-dominated actions, careers, and societies is not born out of valuing women as less than men, but valuing them more than men. The idea is that women are kept out of danger and told to stay safe because their lives are worth more than men are, because women are capable of having children. Thus, they are the ones who are responsible for bringing in the next generation. Therefore, because of their ability to allow a population to continue rather than be wiped out, they are to be protected. The concept of chivalry is that a man goes off to fight so that a woman doesn't have to. A man lays down his life to keep a woman safe so that she can give birth to the next generation. Critics of this will say that it's still sexist because it's boiling women down to only being good for making babies. The fact that you devalue women for following the biological function that they literally evolved to have and is responsible for the perpetuation, longevity, if not survival, of the human race, that is your own damn fault, and it is your problem to overcome. Because the simple fact is, on the Titanic, it wasn't women and children first. It was women and children only. Of the 700 survivors that made it off the ship, the majority of them were women. The men were left behind because it was expected of them to make the sacrifice to keep their wives and children safe, to stay behind so that they could go on. And that is how it has always been throughout human history. You think that men are privileged? Men are the ones who die so that women can be privileged. John isn't suggesting that he go instead of Ellie because of an assumption that she is incapable. He is suggesting that if anyone has to die to do this, he is the one who is more expendable. Keep in mind, while they don't know about the Raptors yet, Arnold still hasn't come back, and Muldoon is arming himself for potential danger. Plus, they don't know what else from the park could have made it this far out to them by now. So by now, they should expect that they are all in very real danger, especially because Arnold has not come back yet. It's like Dumbledore's lines from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince when he explains to Harry why he must make the sacrifice instead of Harry. Because I am older, wiser, and much less valuable than you. More than that, John is taking responsibility here. Ellie is his guest on the island. Her life is in danger only because he brought her here. Everyone's lives are all on him here. He is the one who is ready to take responsibility to correct his mistake so that no one else has to die on his account. John is ready to step up, put his life on the line so that people who he deems as more valuable than himself, the innocents that he put in harm's way, don't have to. But nope, Ellie is a strong, independent woman who don't need no sexist old man getting killed for her. Heck, she even intends to lecture him about it when she gets back because smash the patriarchy. Needless to say, anyone who doesn't have a stick up their ass should recognize how unnecessary and how unrealistic these lines of dialogue are to have in a life or death situation, and it should always leave a bad taste in the audience's mouth that Ellie would be so callous at a time like this. But like I said, this was all just a reaction to the perceived notion of how Ellie was depicted in the novel, by people who not only have too much time on their hands, but ultimately don't know what they're talking about. I want you guys to fully understand what it is that I'm doing with making these videos. I'm not raging against any kind of mention of the idea or beliefs held by the feminist ideology. What I'm pointing out here is that it really is not only unnecessary, but doesn't really fit into the movie. It almost feels like it was crowbarred into the movie, completely shoehorned, just to make a political statement, while really, the rest of the movie, well, it just doesn't really fit with Ellie's character at all. There's no indication in the rest of the movie that she would basically be so callous as to make these sorts of comments, even if she does believe it. Ultimately speaking, it's just not in her nature to actually make comments like this. And that's why I literally start out by saying that these scenes are where Ellie just becomes a mouthpiece for this feminist ideology, when it really doesn't suit her character. Because when you get down to it, Ellie literally goes against most of the tropes and beliefs that the feminist movement actually promotes nowadays. Ellie wants to get married. She wants to have children. That kind of stuff is not welcome in the feminist agenda nowadays. So what I'm saying is that these two scenes don't ruin the entire movie for me, and they don't even go as far as to ruin Ellie's character. They're just minor annoyances that I intend to skip through every single time I watch these movies, because they don't make any sense, they don't fit her character, and worst of all, they're unfair completely unfair. One of the things that I hate most in our modern society is false accusations. I really think that what John was doing here was chivalrous rather than being sexist, and the changes that were forced onto the production team when making this movie were because Crichton was falsely accused of being sexist. And that right there just isn't fair. I don't want these false accusations to continue to affect movies the way that they have been doing. And unfortunately, it wasn't the only reaction. Hey guys, while I wanted this to be a video that would explain the full context of what I have planned, I realized that after just 5 pages of a script, this video was already 19 minutes long, so I decided this will have to be part 1 of what is now going to be a series of me breaking down every single instance of toxic feminism permeating into the Jurassic Park series. So, hope you guys enjoyed part 1. Hope that you guys join me for the next ones. I will see you in the next video. Later.